Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome into Garden of Doom, and this week we are meeting with author Sean B.W. Parker. Met him through also podcastguest.com. So again, shout out to that free service for content creators, which is has been largely great. No, it's been entirely great. And Sean has a very interesting story. I don't know the entirety of the story, but it involves a poltergeist situation, which, like many people around my age, I learned what poltergeist meant from the movie, which was a long, long time ago. But usually we, think of poltergeist situations typically inside, and this is not all indoors. Some of this is outdoors. Now, I very much recall the movie Poltergeist, where things happen in the yard and stuff as well, but I don't know. It's like, my impression of poltergeist is things flying around inside a building, and this is half so, half not, and it's over a fairly long period of time. But without any further ado, Sean, how are you? And welcome into Garden of the Doom. Garden of Doom.
Hi, Jeff. No, very nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. I guess before we get started, maybe just tell the folks about yourself, tell them about your writings, etc.
Yes, thank you. I'm a writer and artist here in the UK, and I've had about 8 books out. I'm on the 9th book now, called Compelling Speech. We've just been published on Audible, so we're in the audiobook world now.
Right.
I've been very active in the arts for about 20 years here in England, and also in Istanbul, where I used to live. A couple of years ago, I was running a venue on the south coast here, where some very strange things happened, which I don't even want to put a label on, but it's worth coming on your show to tell you about it.
Okay, so the south coast of England. So were you southeast, south central, southwest? Tell us about where you were.
It's a county called Sussex, West Sussex. There's east and west, and it was in West Sussex at the time. And I'm not in that town anymore, but I'm kind of close by it. I don't want to name the town itself because it's too specific.
That's fine. Sussex is next to, I know Wessex. Of course, we have Essex. There's, I'm in the United States, so we have an Essex here in Maryland, which of course is, I think in old language basically means, exchequer, which was sort of like the local comptroller or treasurer for a county tax collector. So I think that's where counties came from, is basically where, how lands were divided for tax purposes. So we have Essex. It's here in Baltimore County. It's near a lot of ports and that kind of thing. Sussex, there's a Sussex, ironically north of here in Delaware, which might be most famous for the Sussex chicken farms, which J.M. Mark Briscoe are from. For some of my audience, you know exactly who it is. Some of my audience, you're like, who are they? Google it. But where is so I also learned about Wessex from the Bernard Cornwell books about Alfred the Great, and I know that's sort of in the southwest part of England, but not like Cornwall, which is sort of its own world. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, where is West Sussex? Is it before Cornwall, which is very much part of England and not Wales, or is it east of Cornwall but west of pretty much everything else?
That's some amazing detail there. I don't think a lot of English people actually know all that stuff. So really I didn't know that about the exchequer part of the Essex, Suffolk. So that's really interesting. Sussex is south of London. Essex is east of London. Middlesex is just north of London, but it's a tiny county. We don't have a Nussex. And we actually don't have the Wessex anymore either. But it was in the Thomas Hardy novels in the 19th century, but it's gone since then as a county area itself. It's there as an English concept, but not as a provincial county. So, but your question to Wessex, I think it goes from Somerset, Devon, Hampshire, which is a big lump of southwest England.
And that is not where the Cliffs of Dover is. Is it?
No, the Cliffs of Dover are in the southeast in Kent.
Okay, good. See, I don't want people from the UK to think I know that much about it. I mean, though it makes sense, because you always see people coming by ship and seeing the Cliffs of Dover. It makes perfect sense that they're going, upwards to London, to get into the Thames and go. So, all right. So, I guess I could have figured out if I wanted to be a braggart, but I appreciate that. But it all comes from reading historical fiction and then watching it on TV shows or etc. Anyway, so we have a general idea as to where you were in Sussex. We're not going to name the town. This is another thing. Is it anywhere near where some of those islands are, where, they're sort of all sort of famous islands? Like there's the Isle of Man, the Isle of Wight. There's, concerts in some of these venues, and sometimes there's hauntings associated with some of these places as well. Depending on who you ask, it's hauntings or they're sacred sites, or, and sometimes I'm not sure there's a difference. But is this area anywhere near any of those islands or other islands that would be famous in the UK and maybe not to, a silly colonist like myself?
The Isle of Man is up north off the west kind of coast of England. So we're not near there. We're down south, about 500 miles south. The Isle of Wight is very close to Sussex coast. It's off the Hampshire coast, the Isle of Wight. And it's quite a big island, that one. It's about the size of a quarter of London, probably wrong on that, but that's on the bottom, that's next to the English Channel and England, so it's between them. And then there's the Channel Islands, which are another 100 miles below, right next to France, but we have sovereignty over them.
Okay, so and they're in the Channel, the English Channel, right?
Sorry?
They're in the English Channel, the Channel Islands, right? Which makes perfect sense.
Yes, they are.
It's great. I mean, in America, and certainly not all of my audience is not from America, but I would say at least half, and probably more than that, is American. And, we have New Jersey, New York, and, New Hampshire. And, I'm not sure how many people go to think, look into where was Old Hampshire, regular Hampshire. Where was York? Where was Jersey? And that's one of the things I look at. So, eventually I went to New Zealand, and it turns out New Zealand's like on the coast of Denmark or the Netherlands. I think it's Denmark. So, that one threw me for a little bit of a loop, because I can't think of two places that might be further. Anyway, has nothing to do with you and our show, except for the branches and the roots of the garden go deep and weird and strange directions. So, all right, tell us your story. I understand you were in the arts for many years. You're still in the arts. Author, 8 published books, a 9th on the way. Successful enough that the books have made it to Audible, because not every book makes it to Audible. I know that for sure, because I've wished many books would make it to Audible, especially with guests on the show, so I could consume them quickly, because I'm lazy and don't actually like to read words anymore. I like to hear things. So anyway, tell us your story.
Yeah. So in 2016, I had just come back from living in Istanbul. As I mentioned, I was there for 10 years, a teacher and things. It's a bumpy sort of landing back in Britain. Like, what am I going to do now? You know, you're going for a bit of a change. Part of that change, I decided to open up a arts venue in this town. And it's a small town on the coast here. And I got some investment sort of support from some local arts lovers, and went in with a couple of partners into running it. And it's called Seafish was the name of it, because we're on the coast, and you know that was the names of the investors into one, like not the investors but the management team. Shortened was Seafish. I'm Sean, SE, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We started to take up the carpets in the place, because there was lots of it's on the 3 different floors, and on the top 2 floors we were going to have bed and breakfast, but the carpet they had in there was a bit manky, and we had the leasehold, so we started to take up the carpet, and I'm like, yep, let's do that, make a bold decision, make it all wood, that kind of thing. And within about 2 months of starting the venue, having the live bands every night, from acoustic to punk to electro to folk, everything, lots of colour. And within about a couple of months, our assistant manager was up in the top upstairs doing all this carpet stuff himself. He was doing a very good job of it, and we just started to hear banging everywhere, bang, 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 and I couldn't understand. I spent my time downstairs in the venue doing promo and things. I was hearing this banging and didn't think too much about it. And I asked him once, what's going on up there while you're up there? Are you just going all over the place? Are other people there? He's like, no, I have no idea what's going on. I hear it too. I'm like, right, that's odd. So these banging were happening all the time. And then they were increasing in intensity. And just to let your audience know, I'm a skeptic. I'm quite a hard-headed, I just do an arts bloke, but I like sort of rationality in science. So I was like, well, it's pigeons, or it must be heating or something like that. And that's what the customers would say to us too. That sort of thing, keeping things real as much as possibly. One day I was kind of crouched behind the bar, getting a glass out to serve somebody down. And as I was doing that, a glass flew past my head. It hadn't just come off the shelf from the vibrations. It had a directional throw to it.
Wasn't it an angry customer or an angry staff member?
Exactly. I was there on my own doing the serving behind the bar,
right.
All me. Something wanted to make a point, and it made a point by chucking this glass. This me, but just about. And we actually caught it on CCTV.
Oh, really?
Caught it on there. It was a bit vague, but you can see this thing flying off the shelf.
Sure.
I put it on YouTube to prove to the town, who were all like, yeah. It's like, no, this is what's going on. So I was doing a lot of PR about it too. So I was in the papers. And
well, if you have a link and you send it to me, I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's still there after six years, but okay. I'll have a look to see if it might be. And the next day after that going past, there was a punk band in, and whilst that band was playing, there was another CCTV camera. There's a clock there, and the clock just comes off really hard. It doesn't just sort of jump because of the music like you might understand. It comes off again directionally. That's my hands doing it there on the screen, but people get the idea, And it just and I'm like, that's the second time in 2 days. There's something really strange going on here.
Right. It didn't just fall off the wall like gravity and then fall straight down or a little bit. It fell as if somebody projected it, like they were doing a shot put.
At every point, I looked for rational explanation first. Occam's razor, that's the only way to handle life, just to get to ensure that every sensible thing was sorted out. Loads of people still think that's the case. It's nonsense. But I was there, and I look for rational explanations all the time. And I wouldn't come onto a show like this if I wasn't still, what on earth was going on.
Well, for the record, I appreciate that, but this is Garden on Doom, so this is exactly the show to come on if you have. Now, the truth is, I'm a skeptic too, despite the show and the title. So I appreciate all of that. So I'm making a little joke at my own expense, not at yours. But I think that any longtime listener of the show knows that, and any new listeners, I guess I just have to I just explain myself. So anyway, not about me today or ever. I probably say that once a show. So so we'll continue. We've got something through a glass at you and something through a clock in a direction, not necessarily at you, but it was obviously a projectile, not just gravity acting or vibrations and gravity acting together.
That's exactly it. And at the time that happened, I was doing the sound for this band over in the corner of the venue, and I was attracted over to look at the bar by the waitress, who said, and this clock had come down between two customers and was smashed on the floor. So I hadn't actually seen it, but I saw their reaction, which was just horror shock. And after the gig afterwards, I had another look at the CCTV. I went, that's got a camera on it. And I found it coming off in the same way. Very strange, those two things both had cameras on them. So, fortunately, that was that one.
Was the band there at the time?
The band was in the corner of the room, about 30 yards, meters over there, in the other corner, getting on with their stuff. So I don't think that they'd have noticed the bit of commotion in the venue part, which I'm trying to run. So I kept it all quiet from then. Just did it the next day.
Okay. It's too bad. If they had noticed it, that'd be good to get some information from them or validation. But if they weren't there, they weren't there. I want to, and it may be too early in the story, maybe you come to this later, but were there any reports before you and your group took over the premises about it being haunted, or before there being irregularities?
The people that were there before us didn't do well and went out because of not having any more money, and we sort of discovered some odd things in the place, like kind of robes and dolls and little odd things that you don't want to attach too much importance to things, because it's not fair on them. I don't actually know them very well. 6 years ago, as I say. And I was talking to that assistant manager.
8 years ago now. Almost 8 years, almost. You said 2016.
8 years indeed. Doesn't time go on, so.
I have a question. So sometimes I'm on a show called The Paranormal Guys, which, by the way, I'm going to forward them your information because they would love to have you on their show. I'm certain of it. And obviously, since you're on podcast guests and other forms, you would love to be on their show. So it's a win-win for everybody. And the reason I'm going into this is because I did the show with them recently, and they lost the entire second hour of it. StreamYard lost it, rather. They didn't. I mean, StreamYard didn't work. But the role I play is I'm the paranormal attorney. So they give me legal situations, legal questions, but with a paranormal twist. And one of them was, what's a seller's liability or a realtor's liability if they sell a haunted property? And in the U.S., there really isn't much of any, but there's some if there's a known defect, and what's a defect and all. And I don't want to recapture that show or steal it because we're going to do it again. But my question to you in this long meandering way is: in the UK, is there any duty for the sellers or the real estate agent, if there is such a thing, a profession in Britain, which I'm sure there is because I read Dracula, that to disclose something of this nature? I guess that's the question. Is there any duty for them to disclose it? Because I'm sure they did not.
Well, no, absolutely. And if it were, I don't think the English justice system would have any tolerance for such a thing, and they would just kind of quietly get rid of whatever the complaint was. They didn't tell us there was a ghost there.
I sort of feel it would be the same in the U.S., but I thought maybe it might be different in England, a country filled with henges and druids and what. But I get every country has their lore, and we all romanticize other countries for their superstitions and lore and legends, and sort of treat our own as Bigfoot, whatever.
But would like to say though, I'm able to talk about it now in an objectified way with the passage of time. But at the time, I was seriously disturbed because I couldn't spend. It got to a point where I was having difficulty spending nights in the place because I was often on my own in there as a guy in the top of the top floor on my own, and it got extremely spooky to the point of disturbing, and I was starting to lose weight, to look pale, and things like that. So now I can be like, but then. It's a fair question. I was really, really disturbed by it, and that's the truth.
I don't blame you. I didn't even know that you were living there at the time. I guess it makes sense that while you're doing the renovations, and it's going to be a bed and breakfast, which is a sort of hotel. Why not stay in the accommodations and, not live for free per se, but not carry another, maintenance of another home while you're, engaging in other business, and you can sort of avoid those redundancies. But when there's phantasms in there or something, demonic, whatever it turns out that it is or might be. Sleep is something you might lose, and appetite and all things. How long did you stay there until you were like, I got to get out of here?
We started the project. We opened in March 2016, and in December that year we left. But the activity started to die down in September, so a couple of months before that, after we started to have lots and lots of hassle and pressure from the local council about noise, some complaints about that, some licensing things which are the legalities about it, which are properly legal. Obviously, that wasn't the ghost's fault. It was, it's the fact that the people running it, including me, were a bunch of artists and sort of not as scrupulous about the rules as we possibly should have been.
Right.
So we kind of got some discipline about that.
The noise, though, was that the noise from the musicians, or was that the noise from the? I'll just call them ghosts, just to keep it the.
Yeah, no, the ghost stuff was entirely internal and very focused around. For me, to be honest about it, some other people did experience stuff, but it was very much on me. And but it was about the noise itself, because the venue was in a residential part of town.
Okay.
It's a restaurant and a live venue at the same time. So there was some of the issues were all about that.
And I want to get back into here now. I know we're jumping around, and I want to stay in the chronology, and I want to get you back to it. Though I have just a silly question struck me, and we're both middle-aged, so I'm sure you are sympathetic that sometimes you lose a thought, or you're afraid you will lose a thought. And I don't want to lose this one just because, as silly as it is, it's really on my mind. That is, did the ghostly activity diminish or increase with certain types of music?
That thing about the punk band and the clock, I started to think that at that time, is it having a complaint about this kind of music? Because they were quite intense. And I thought, that's ridiculous. And the thing is that it would get more busy, the banging would get more busy, like thumping from the upstairs, sort of behind the stairwell that I could see from my control panel. It would just be thumping in a very, very loud way, the louder that the venue got. So it's about 10:30 or 11 p.m. of an evening when the place was full. It's very lively, lots of alcohol around, all that sort of thing. It would be pounding on there. I could hear it. No one else cared or understood the pattern.
Right.
And other people didn't understand that there was nothing making it, nothing physical making it. And I knew that. And the staff, the core staff, started to realise that. We give each other glances and go, "Look, it's up."
Right.
That's the place that we got to over the period of a couple of months.
So it didn't like punk music for sure, which, by the way, nobody really does. I mean, even the people who like punk, they're just pretending. They just pretend they like it because they want to be edgy. You know, they know it's not likable. But the punk music was the only one. The other music, it was a neutral factor. So some music could anger them, but no, there was no music that soothed these savage beasts, which maybe they weren't savage beasts. Okay, so let's get back to the chronology because you barely got into it. I mean, we got to renovations. At some renovations were basically done. You were open for business. We get it. Not all the licensing check, but that isn't this show. That's a different show. That's for the county court and sheriff of the exchequer or something. So bring us back to where I stopped you from going on that detour, and let's go back to the ghost story.
After the clock, and I'm attempting to put it all together now because it's then is maybe the May or the June of 16. There've been the pint glass and the clock and the banging. And one morning, and I mentioned I started to get a bit ill and to be very stressed by it. And it was about this time, over the summer, like hot as it gets. One night, I was alone at the top of the place after having closed down. But there were some people in the bar they left over having a lock-in, as we call it, just a couple of drinks after it closed down with some trusted regulars. And I understood that was happening and going on. Just gives you some comfort in that sort of thing.
Sure.
I'm not entirely alone in this building.
Of course.
But it's a long way down. So it's very much like the top part's all separate. And there's this thing going on. There's nobody else in the place. There's none of the bed and breakfast. There were no lodgers, which came later. It started to calm down after the lodgers came, by the way, yeah. This night, for some reason, no idea why, there's nothing to correlate it. The banging was unidirectional, just in my room. Bang, bang here, bang on the pipes there. Quietness, and bang again, faster and faster. As in, it was a bunch of different sort of sounds talking to each other in the room. And it was a very oppressive feeling. I think I was getting scared, so it's even more oppressive. So it's like, what can I do about this except escape? Which is not a nice, to fight and flight, and it's not a nice place to be in. So I put on my dressing gown, because I was just in bed, and put my dressing gown on, and I actually scampered down to the lock-in in my dressing gown and slippers. And everyone turned around and said, "Sean, are you all right?" Because I'm the boss of the place.
Right.
Coming into the, they all thought they were going to get like a big sort of discipline talk. I'm like, I just needed to see some other people. And it's just a manager said, "You look like you've seen a ghost. What's up?" And and I'm like, I just can't be up there right now. I didn't tell the lock-in because I didn't want them to think I was too cookie, But that's what was going on that night.
Huh. Let me just. I mean, I think it's implied by absence, but I assume none of your other business partners also spent nearly as much time there, or were also living in the premises as well.
The main partner, who had also a house in the same town on a different sort of side of the town, was actually quite a spiritual person, and she started to get interested in the subject quite quickly. She switched onto it and would sort of do exorcisms and things like that. She was very sort of keen on it, but she kept that from me, skeptical as I am, but was sort of understood what was going on. She was trying to get rid of this sort of presence from the place. With her, the one time she was having a cigarette in the back courtyard, just out the back door, and she kind of came back in looking a bit shocked. And I'm like, "You're right." And all of the back doors in the place, 6 different doors, were just slamming like this, like in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
There was no wind that night, and how would 6 at the same time be doing that?
Right.
All of these doors were doing this. And she came in and told me that, and I'm like, "Right, well, just another thing to add to this craziness going on." So there was her, and she had a room there, which she sometimes stayed in, but not as often as me. I was there all the time.
Okay. What about the, I mean, there was staff that there a lot, and you said that you had regulars. I mean, some of those folks, after a while, would be able to discern the normal sounds of the operation of the business, and some of them would at some point be able to discern the difference between musical acts and bass and vibrations of what was coming from the music and what wasn't. Did they get afraid to be there? Did they feel as though they were on the main floor, that they were okay? Did they think it was sort of cool, or did you start losing customers and staff because they were scared?
I hope not. There was a degree of cool about it because they're like, what, here? If you didn't understand the building and you were in the venue, you wouldn't know that the banging coming from over there isn't coming from a being. You just think there's some work going on. So if they did hear it, they would have just thought there's someone in the next room doing some work. But I knew there was no way that there could be any work going on in that next room.
So you never told them. You never said, we're not having any renovations done there. You just figured best leave it alone.
That's right. Except for the pint glass and the clock thing, which were in our space. There was only a couple of people who saw it, but they saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it was like our secret,
Right.
So if there were just people in there, I wouldn't sort of say, stop the music, it's all right, there's not a ghost, there's some workmen, Like, I don't do that. I just kind of carry on with the day and hope it's all right. But I was happy to get the stuff on the CCTV because they did talk about it a little. I didn't know how much I wanted to talk about it because I didn't want to antagonize it. I know this sounds utterly nonsensical now, but I didn't want to make a fuss there to make it worse on me because I knew it had a bit of a thing for me because it sounds unbelievable. I don't really know, I can't understand that I'm saying it, but I didn't want it to think that I was giving it hell, so it was going to give me more hell. And that's how that's how it got.
Well, it doesn't sound that ridiculous. I mean, first of all, it's one thing if somebody's of independent means, but this was a new business. You said you came back from Turkey after 10 years and trying to rebuild your life and get something going. So you probably put a lot of your economic, hopes into this. And you're the only one that's there all the time. So, we all take things personally when we shouldn't. So, I'm sure at some point you were trying any rationalization, technique to try to, figure out a way so that you could coexist and keep the business going. And, if it didn't go away, maybe at some point pivot to come to the coolest haunted music venue in Western civilization or whatever. But you weren't ready to do that kind of branding just yet.
No, I didn't quite have the guts to go that. I wasn't expecting this part of the business to be a thing, as they say.
Okay, so we have the venue, we have the 3 stories, but it's a big building, so not all the rooms are adjacent. You've got the performing center where the bar is and whatever, but there's plenty of rooms where, an unfamiliar person or even a staff member might think that there's just routine work doing on a place that, everyone in the area knew that was being renovated. So why wouldn't they think that there's ongoing work being done and you're trying to, make more rooms for the eventual bed and breakfast? So, but we haven't gotten to the point where the bed and breakfast is open. So I don't know if there's any, pivotal, poltergeist tales between, your the friend, I'll just call the sensitive coming in and by sensitive, I mean like empathic psychic, not, they cry a lot, and getting to the bed and breakfast part, because I don't want to skip anything that's, fun and interesting.
No, yeah, it's, I'm sort of trying to think about all the little bits and bobs that happened. There was definitely like a build-up to it as the manager started to hear the banging up to this thing in the back garden with all the doors doing this. Felt very peak-like, and that was at the same time as I had to leave my room to come downstairs because I was so... Right, that was very much like a watershed because I'm like, well, this isn't very bloody sustainable, is it? I can't be very alarmed in my room and doing this. That's right. Like a day or so after that, I was forced down again by the same kind of banging, and I had to sleep in the sofa in the venue because there was no action in the venue itself. That's right. It would apart from the clock and the thing early, there was no banging and sort of intense pressure. That was all in the part upstairs where we'd taken up the carpets. So quite early on, I was associating the taking up of the carpets, which is quite a radical act in a way. It was like a statement, with causing upset to something that's there and has been quiet, has been left by the previous owners, no idea. The assistant manager, to give it some context, did tell me that he thought that 20 years before, a young man had died of a heroin overdose in one of the rooms upstairs. This is very anecdotal, apocryphal, The town was full of that kind of story. I went, well, okay, it's interesting to know. We weren't able to source that. I asked a couple of previous landlord and various others for the veracity, but no one was able to give it the verification. But it was, a bit of a clue. But yeah.
And not to diminish the tragedy of someone dying from an overdose, but that isn't usually the sort of thing that you associate with ghosts. Now, that doesn't mean that our usual association with ghosts is correct. I mean, not to say it's rote, but there's an opiate epidemic, they call it an epidemic for a reason. It's not so unusual. Their entire community is riddled with that. I have no idea if this community was one of those or not, but a drug overdose in a building, to me, it just means that it was available as shelter for someone, not necessarily, I don't know. I usually associate some sort of trauma or loss, sort of externally caused. But what do I know? What creates a ghost and what doesn't? I mean, nothing. I mean, nobody really does. So these could just be the meaningless ramblings of a podcast host. But I don't. Again, like you, I'm unconvinced that would be the cause of it. Is there anything about the land itself, the site of the land? Was there, some sort of historic battle there, some sort of massacre? Was, it was an equivalent of Mary Queen of Scots, sequestered away there and killed by enemies. I mean, obviously the best they could give you as far as local crime was a possible, overdose of a local person, which again, not to diminish that tragedy, but doesn't make for a great ghost story.
Not quite. It's a pirate town.
So now we're talking.
That's literally what it was. It's an old school, hundreds of year old pirate village, which in this century, the last one, has become run down like lots of English towns have done. And so smuggling and piracy, that kind of thing, historically was very big. And it was seen as a resort for people coming down from London to get some sea air. The king, an Edwardian king, I think it was King Edward himself, did say he was on his deathbed and said, "I'm not going down to that town," with a swear word attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it has, and it's a well-known place, and it's sort of historical to the tune of like hundreds of years old, where it would be seen as a resort from London, as a place to go and clear your lungs and your head.
Okay.
So it's got some history to it, and the pirates and the smugglers, why not? The place itself, the building, I think, probably about 100 years old. So it's not as old as the village itself, because it's like it's not in the middle of the village; it's outside it a little bit. So it's about 100 years old, but it's built in the Tudor style. So it's a very good-looking place and very sturdy, but also haunted.
Did you have anyone come in, besides your partner, who sort of had those types of skills, but did you have any other psychics or exorcists or anyone who did any dowsing, or even more banal, like, now that I hear it's a pirate town, like, did you have like LiDAR done to see if maybe there was like treasure, buried there, and the ghost is trying to protect their treasure? It's like Scooby-Doo, except there's not someone under a mask. There's an actual ghost there trying to, protect what's theirs.
Anytime I extended it outside of my own experience or the people that work there, I felt like we were making it more of a big thing than it should be. So I did talk about it on Facebook a little bit, just in order to, because I was doing like a network of the kind of publicity you do on Facebook, and I had a lot of interest from the town because of this part of the story. There was a bunch of interest about the bands and the arts, and then there's a bunch of interest about this, and a couple of sensitives or exorcists or people, spiritualists, were dead keen. One lady did actually come down and had a walk around the place, and I said, and she definitely felt something, she said, but she didn't do anything. I don't know what she did, but she definitely came along and had a feel about the place. There was one guy. This was right towards the end of it all happening, and towards the time it closed, which was about the licensing part 2. But he was coming in. He was in a wheelchair with cancer, end of his life, an American, and if you actually happened to live in that town, he was there with his partner carer, who got to the door of the place and said, "I can't go in there, John." And he's like, "Come on, Tony, what's the problem? Get in." He's like, "No, I actually can't go in there." He didn't sort of tell me this at the time. We were sort of Facebook pals, But just after it closed, and I sort of told him about all this and what had happened, he's like, "That's interesting. I couldn't actually get in there on your closing day because the other half wouldn't go in because of energy." She said, "It's just there's something too evil about it," which is not something that I felt about it, though. It had its problems, but.
Well, maybe they, they were more in tune with that frequency than you are. I mean, we all have different skill sets. Not that I want to volunteer anyone for these things, but I've had two guests on the show, both in the UK. One is named Maria Wheatley. She's pretty well known in the paranormal and UFO and alternate history and archaeology community. She also told me she's a master dowser, and she garnered those skills from her father, who apparently is the master dowser. And also I think he's now Bishop Alan Cox. When I first met him, he was Reverend, he's sort of a spiritual healer, which so I don't know, maybe two people now. I did hear you say that it's closed, so maybe the property isn't available to you anymore. So we certainly haven't gotten to the end of the story, so I guess no spoilers just yet. But so at some point, the bed and breakfast was opened, and you're still in business. Now we're still, we're in a span of months. You said opened, I believe, in the summer. You closed by December, so we're in one or two handfuls of months here from beginning to end. So when did the bed and breakfast open for lodging business and breakfast, and how'd that go?
Yeah, I think that opened in about the end of the June there, in the high summer. And it went fine, but it turned out to be quite stressful for the partner going in who was supposed to be running it all. There was some internal politics, as these things attract. So we started in the June, but we also had an idea to open the place up for lettings. So we started to allow the lettings. I was already there, and there were a couple of other rooms.
Now lettings, is that, I mean, that's not a term we use here. Is that like private parties, basically?
To actually live there, to have a tenancy there.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't not just a bed and breakfast. It's also somebody could live there for a longer period of time.
Exactly. That exactly.
Gotcha.
And that turned out to be very attractive, and so we had it as a B&B, but then within 2 months, like by the end of the summer, we'd actually fulfilled all the rooms with people who were paying the rent regularly. So that was by September, I think.
Great.
So then we decided to go away because the trade that we might get over the summer, basically it was quite difficult doing the B&B part, but it was easier doing the tenancy. And we had some people there that we could trust and were there on a regular basis. Though, as you can see, the whole of the time scale is not massive anyway. So it was a few months and a bit of an adventure. We populated it with the tenants from the September to the December.
Well, for anybody in the future who, I know you didn't say the name of the town, but I think you gave enough information that if somebody really wanted to, they could figure it out. But if anybody's interested in having a place where you're going to let the premises to, year-round residents and have a venue, and you want it to be haunted, and you think that that's cool, well, there might be an opportunity for you. All right, so the tenants, you had the letters or the tenants, they're there. Did any of them experience or notice the difference in the sounds, or did they just all think it was just the sounds of a new and unfamiliar old building that was being renovated and settling, and sea sounds, and, I don't know how close to the ocean you were, so I don't know if, you'd hear, gulls and waves crashing on the rocks or whatever.
It's a very good question, and I'm only starting to put together the timeline now as you ask it. The pressure from the council and it becoming populated with long-term tenants in September, October, coincided with the downturn in activity, put it that way. So that the activity of it was there over the summer, whilst it was like a B&B, with people coming and going and not always there. By September, October, it had calmed down. There was very little, this and that, but very little. Like, it hadn't just stopped. It just trickled off as it was more populated upstairs. So I don't think anybody else experienced it in the way that I did. I might be wrong on that, but we didn't talk about it because we were too busy talking about everything else in the place, So
Did you still have the musical acts when you had the letters, or was it too difficult to have people living there and have loud music?
We told them as they came in, you're coming into a venue here. So they're like, okay, and it was cheaper because of that.
So nothing stopped. But did you still have a variety of music? Did you still have heavy metal and punk in addition to folk and rock? So it's the full variety. Okay, but it sounds almost as if the ghost or ghosts liked the company, the full-time company. Maybe they didn't like the people just thrashing about there so much. But once you had some people settled in, maybe it's sort of like not being alone.
That thought did occur to me at the time, Jeff, and I like it. And that's how I've rationalised it, because that's very much how it did seem to coincide. Now, I haven't thought about that detail for a couple of years, and I think you got it, yeah.
Interesting. All right, so we have letters. That's going pretty well, but there seems to be external forces, not even ghost related, but it sounds like there was some dissension among the business partners. You're only a few months in. That's never a good sign with any business, ghosts or no ghosts. There was some, maybe some T's weren't crossed and some I's weren't dotted legally or licensing or whatever the regulatory scheme is, or maybe just the council, the neighbors were complaining too much. And the council's like, seemed like a good idea until we learned that they weren't going to play all, Gordon Lightfoot and Arlo Guthrie. And instead they were going to play the Sex Pistols and the Ramones. And so there were some external forces on there. What is it that caused the ultimate closure? Was it more ghosts, or was it more just plain old legal bureaucracy?
The ghosts by that stage had gone into the distance. It had been replaced by the licensing police, who would come on a much more they would come at 11 p.m. on a Friday night to try and catch people out having a drink without pizza, that kind of thing. There's just a lot of scrutiny on us. So it was coming then from a legal place. There was all kinds of different. There was some artwork stolen. There were all kinds of different allegations going all over the place, and it just became a shower of sort of tension, but not sort of supernatural anymore. Very bureaucratic, very legal, very much like the town wanted us out of there.
Okay. So, well, we're very much going to get back to the ghost story, but obviously you told us you came from Turkey. This was a bit of a tumult for you, and then this was going to be something. This was a tumult for you. So, what are you doing now? Like, are you in a better place?
Oh yes, I'm fine. That place did cause some big ripples for everybody's lives. I believe it's a restaurant now. I haven't been back to the town because the whole thing was so dramatic. We're talking about it in the supernatural sense. There was also the legal sense, which was huge. So since then, I've been away and done various different things. Came to a town. I've got some family around, so I'm still in the county. And I'm just back to my writing self now, which I probably always should have done. But I took on a big business role. I was a managing director, but really in charge of bookings. Mm-hmm. So I was responsible for the punk that was brought in, that set off whatever. I don't know. The noise, I have to take responsibility for some of the noise complaints, though we tried to make it as quiet and okay for the public as we possibly could. But whatever we did was not enough, because there were certain facts that didn't like it, whether supernatural or real.
All right, well, if this was Garden Views, we'd be talking more about the business and the legal aspects and the zoning and the neighborhood pressure. But this is Garden of Doom, so let's get back to the ghosts. So, you've got the lodgers in there and the long-term tenants, or what would be long-term tenants, hopefully. And the ghost is settling down. When did the ghost rear up again, or even in the settling down, how did the ghost or ghosts make themselves known?
Well, I think there's only a couple of more like incidents that happened, and the one which was sort of back, like if we come back to the July-August part, just before the tenants came in, and I was but after the really bad stuff had happened before, but I was in the upstairs bathroom just one morning on my own. Of course, it was always when I was on my own, almost annoyingly, because it's hard to get the verification. That's why I was so happy to get a CCTV of it. I was in the bathroom one morning. There was a bang under the sink, just a huge, and it's almost like the sink came up to meet my face, like brushing my teeth or whatever. And then I'm like, oh, that's this thing. And then 10 seconds later, a harder bang, and it's like, enough of this place. And I'm like, and then another 10 seconds later, even harder bang, where the thing actually seemed to move. It was so strong, and there isn't anybody underneath this bathroom. There isn't anyone downstairs. The entire building was empty early in the morning on a Sunday or something. So it was not a human being making this massive bang, and it wasn't a pigeon and it wasn't a rat. It's like a very, very angry thing that's like, I'm going to get Sean on his own in the bathroom. And so I shot out of there. And just the last one was I think it was in the August before they were all coming in, and I was there with a friend of mine for one night after all the action had gone, and we were just kind of winding down with a glass of wine, and I was talking about the presence, and she was a massively skeptical hardhead, as much as me and probably more, who said, there's no such things as ghosts, Sean. And I'm like, I know what you mean, and I know you would say that, and I agree. However, and almost at that very point, the back door handle of the kitchen, about sort of 10 meters away, started to go up and down super incredibly fast. And she looked at it, and I went, I put up my hands.
Right.
And I kind of went out to have a look and said, there's no one here. And she checked, and there was nobody there at all. But a very, very fast and hard sort of shaking of that handle for about 20 seconds. And she sort of, we never talked about it again, but she certainly understood where I was coming from after that.
We'll have to ask this. I mean, we're talking about probably an older building. You say it was about 100 years old. I mean, somebody out there in the audience is going to say, well, maybe it was just an old boiler or old water heater or heat pump or the generators, what was powering the place. Maybe they were old generators and they were backing up and they were, sort of like the, how in The Shining, the boiler room was like a character basically in the hotel. But maybe this was just real old appliances which were still working, but straining and banging. I assume you had like contractors or electricians and HVAC people and whatever, and the utility people come in and eliminate that as a suspect.
We absolutely eliminated everything that we possibly could, because there was a lot of chat with people coming in. We would talk about the ghost with the close regulars or whatever it was, and we talk about all that stuff, and I go, well, where? What is it? What heater? What pigeons? What rats? And everything else. And they weren't able. And the problem is, anybody that had heard it, anybody experienced, understood the communicative feel of what was going on. It wasn't just jink, 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 like a person hammering something. It was trying to express something. It was angry. It was an angry feel.
Was it a code? Did you have any code breakers come in and see if it was Morse code or some other kind of, military code or scouts code or something that somebody could recognize?
Those kind of bangs I would have only had in my own room upstairs, and that was only happening when I was in there on my own. So it certainly never occurred to me to try and work out what the code was. I'm just like, something's very weird in this room.
So you needed me then. That's
It's a good question. It just never occurred to me to do that.
Okay. All right. I mean, I've seen a lot of, sci-fi movies where they're making contact with what they think are aliens or whatever, and there's always a code. Problem is you did much enough sci-fi. That's you could, right, clearly, obviously. When we first spoke, you said, I think your hook was, do you want to hear about an outdoor poltergeist? So what was the outdoor stuff?
Exactly. I'm aware of the outdoorness of it all. The majority, was actually in the venue. However, there was that back garden with all these doors doing their thing when the co-director was out there. And also her and the assistant manager who first heard it and first sort of started to kick off when he was doing his work upstairs. Her and him were coming out of the kitchen in the back courtyard, walking down some steps towards the venue. There was this courtyard there where there was a kitchen, and they have to cross that courtyard to get into the venue. So it's like that. As they were coming down these steps, they reported a force going past them, almost knocking them off their feet as it was going into the kitchen there. So it was like almost coming across that courtyard. There was something about that courtyard where there was a lot of energy, or I don't know, there's a lot of energy focused in that courtyard. And it's almost like that would affect the venue itself. It affected that handle, it affected these doors, and they experienced some of the rushing going past them. So that's all I got was this thing going past them, trying to get back into the venue. And that's what they reported to me. That's as far as the outdoorsy bit really goes.
It's not a earthquake zone, is it?
There isn't anywhere in Britain that is over 3 on the Richter scale. So no.
Any henges nearby or other sort of druid sites?
There are some woods that they used to talk. There was a couple of people that came in and talked to me about, I think, Corton Woods or Clacton Woods, but there were some woods there where they used to have witchcraft, and there've been a couple of murders there over the last couple of decades. Some pretty grisly stuff. So, which everyone would say was related to witchcraft, but people say that of everything these days. So, but yeah, that was just outside of the village itself, the town itself.
Yes, well, the end is always nigh, which is great for the Garden of Doom. The end is always nigh, so, that's our brand. But yeah, so witchcraft and grisly murder seems more likely than some dude overdosing, in a vacant building. So that's more on point. So listen, so what was the final straw? Like, when did you decide you had to get out, or when did your partners decide that you had to get out? Was it over your objection? Did you give up to the ghost and the government? I mean, what was the end story? Because you told me, like, by December 2016, this was done. Everyone had enough. What broke you?
That's right. It's a combination of these licensing police coming around all the time, the hangover from these events, and the stress that had put me through personally, and loads of internal politics, and also some external politics in the town, was just basically encircling the venue, like sort of the CBGBs or something, but if they had a poltergeist and a bunch of sort of pirates sort of trying to run it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just sort of kind of collapsed into a heap, and that was about Christmas of then. And it's like, well, that was a project, and I just went to another town, and everybody else in there, there was all kinds of difficult things that happen when you close a business, which aren't for here,
Right.
So it was just the 10 months of really, it was a really, really creative place with exhibitions and something every night. And I think it's that something every nightness about it that ended it, really.
So this was a little bit over 7 years ago that this happened, about 7.5 years ago. And you said you think it's a restaurant now. I mean, how long did it take for it to become something else? Did it go straight to the restaurant, or were there some intervening or intermediary projects there, or did it just lay dormant, the property, for a while?
I understand it wasn't that long. There was a couple of months between us going and the new place starting, but I separated myself to such an extent that I don't know.
So you haven't heard anything about if there's still hauntings going on?
I haven't, because I don't know. Some people that are still in that town have sort of told me that they've been in for a meal and it's very nice, and I'm like, great, glad to hear it. And that's as far as we got with it, because there's a lot of people who weren't even affected by the bangings at all. So.
Right, you don't want to ask them, how's the ghost doing? And they're like, what ghost, Sean? what do you... Okay, so, all right. So what was the most terrifying? Was it the glass thrown at your head? Was it the clock? Was it the outdoor banging? I mean, which was the part that really got you?
The clock thing was just a surprise, because it was at the start of everything, and there were other people there. So it was just like, whoa, what's going on? This is weird. But it's like an extension of the first banging. But the worst thing was when I was upstairs on my own there, and I couldn't stay in the room anymore because I was so scared. So, I haven't had that since I was a boy. And so it's like, that was the worst one, having having to leave and come down. Thank goodness there were other people there in the bar, because otherwise I might have had to leave the entire place and go and sit on the beach or something, you know.
Have you written on this?
I have actually done a short story, which is I have. I haven't published it yet because it's I don't quite know. It's not in the style of what I normally do, which is cultural theory and things. So it's like I'm trying to decide how to do it. But it's a fictionalized story at the moment, and this is the first time I think I've talked about it publicly at all. So.
Well, as a writer, it seems a lived experience might be interesting. Anyway, I want to shift gears for a while because I'm actually really interested in your 10 years in Turkey. I mean, so you probably lived there from around 2005, 2015, 2006 to 2016. You're obviously an Englishman in Turkey. That's probably not that unusual, but you're certainly a minority in that country. I'm sure you're a minority religion in that country, regardless of whether you're religious or not. It is, in the aftermath of 9/11, it is in the aftermath of, the Afghan and the Iraqi wars. Both are ongoing. You're in a Muslim country. You're from Britain. Britain is, at our side, meaning the United States, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. Not that Turkey loves Iraq or Iraq loves Turkey, but still, like, that had to be a tough time. But maybe I'm assuming too much. I've been to Turkey. I was in Turkey for not a long time, 3 or 4 days during my honeymoon for my first marriage, and it was lovely. But I was also very cognizant of being a minority. Also very cognizant of being a tourist, and everybody knew that. What was your experience like? First of all, why did you choose to live there? What did you do in there? And what was your experience like in Turkey? And why'd you leave?
So that was 2004 that I went there. And apropos your question, it's like I went there because I was after my master's degree. I was trying to work out what to do. I had a bit of postgraduate depression, confusion. I'd met some great sort of Turkish friends in London, and I really missed them when they went back. Really missed their friendship and wanted to see them again. So went out to Istanbul on an idea of a holiday, and happened to stay. And also after 9/11, all the rest of it, if you remember, of course you do, that the media was so packed full of anti-Muslim, anti-Eastern stuff. I wasn't. It's not that I'm going to deny that, but I wanted to experience it for myself to know what they're on about and to see what's true and what's not, and use that passport for something, So it's like, right, I'm going to go and check it out. There's an investigator in me that likes to do that kind of thing.
Sure.
And it wasn't the Turkish people, that's for sure. They were just an incredibly diverse and mixed and interesting group of people.
Yeah, no, I mean, Turkey's arguably the crossroads of the world, or at least the world is sort of, we know it from, I don't know, we'll just call it biblical to modern times, and so a lot of variety. And then, I think people forget or just don't know that the Roman Empire lasted longer in Constantinople, which is Istanbul now, than it did in Rome. And those people didn't consider themselves, I mean, it wasn't Turkey yet. They didn't consider themselves Anatolian. They considered themselves Roman. If you ask them, they'd say, we're Romans. So it's definitely interesting. And when I was there, people were lovely, absolutely lovely. Never felt threatened, nothing. You could wander around, whatever. Everyone offered you tea. It was terrific. But living there is a different experience, I would think. I mean, did you ever feel worried? Did you ever just wander into the wrong place and realize that you looked the wrong way? I don't really care about anyone's religion, but if you're, a practicing Christian or Jew or Buddhist or whatever, did you find it difficult to worship? If you're not, then, I guess it's sort of moot. But like, what was your experience like there?
I was a part-time teacher out there of English and cultural studies here and there in a couple of English schools and universities. And at a couple of the conversation classes, you would go to certain subjects, to get them practicing English and all the rest of it. And they had certain themes. And so if we're talking about evolution, for example, the Darwinism, and basically they would be laughing at me, and so we come from monkeys, sir. We don't come from monkeys, and so we get onto an Abrahamic thing quite quickly, which I'd have to steer away from because it's very strange having science laughed at when you're trying to teach. And I'm not there to change minds, I'm there to teach English. So.
Well, welcome to the United States. It's the same thing for, 40% of our country. Well, maybe it is. I don't know. Shut up, Jeff.
It's a subject, isn't it? And it's something that was an education on that part of it, what not to do. But like, I did get into some issues there where I was walking home one night from the town centre. I was a musician there, as well, so we did gigs in the middle of the city in Taksim, and sometimes I'd come out after the gig and have to walk home to a different suburb. And I was coming through the park one day where everyone said, "Don't go through that park." I'm like, "Well, why not?" And everyone said about the dogs. And as I was walking through that park one day, the dogs did actually attack me. So they all started to howl around me and do a pack thing. And I'm like, "Oh, these people weren't joking, were they?" And a particular dog, he bit me on the back of the leg. This other one took me down by my shin or my trousers. And I'm like, this is seriously hairy. And I kicked one of them, because I had to, there were 6 of them. And I saw, thank God, a taxi coming around the corner. I got the taxi to stop and said, "Can I get in?" And I piled myself in there. And he sped off and went, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" in Turkish. And I'm like, a bit of a problem here. So there's a part of a dog attack there, which was a bit of a nightmare.
Well, so were the dogs racist, or you were just trespassing, and the dogs or were they wild dogs, or were they like people's guard dogs, or you didn't have time to ascertain the identity of the dogs and just wanted to get out of there?
They were strays.
Okay.
In Istanbul, they're famous for you don't go through the park. But as an English bloke who walks through parks, is whatever, you just think, oh, it's all a bunch of nonsense until it becomes not nonsense. That was the education of it.
Well, probably being attacked by stray dogs or feral dogs is probably better than being attacked by feral people. I'm sorry to ask you, because this was on our docket, but in disclosure to you and to the audience, some years ago, I was toying with the idea of doing a podcast where I wanted to interview people who, you wouldn't traditionally think of minorities, but they would be minorities in the country that they're in. So, like a white man in Turkey, But my first one I wanted to do was an Arab Israeli, which of course is 25% of the population, but still very interesting. And I desperately wanted to find someone of African descent in Russia, literally a Black Russian. And I wanted to find a Japanese person in Africa. And I realized that was just really hard to do. I had a name, I forgot it occurs to me. I think the better name would be Different Strokes. And it's still on my, list of projects to maybe do one day, but probably has dropped. But that's why I'm so interested in all that. But also I would think that an Englishman, Caucasian, who lives in Turkey for 10 years, during that time, in the era where sort of the Western world and the Eastern world wasn't exactly seen eye to eye, not that it is now either, that you're probably not a shrinking violet is I guess what I'm getting to. And, and then, your first thing you're need to call the Ghostbusters, but there aren't any Ghostbusters. I wonder, but I know that Mythbusters and the Ghost Explorers and, Ghost Hunters, maybe they're real, maybe they're not. I don't know, but I've met people who do that, who are from local chapters and and whatnot. Did you ever call in the British chapter of the Ghost Hunters?
Where?
I don't know. I don't know. I assume they would be located around London, and they'd load up their boot and drive on the wrong side of the road and. Right.
No, I see what you mean now. I thought we were still on Istanbul.
Sorry.
Yeah. I think the things on TV and on YouTube that we're talking about with those Ghostbusters teams, they weren't happening back when I was doing Seafish, so they certainly weren't on my register.
Okay.
It was such a lived experience, and that stuff seems so much like entertainment that I can't really put them together. Do you know what I mean? I took it really badly and thought I need to get out of this situation. But that stuff's like entertainment, so it's like we're doing now.
Yeah, and perhaps if there wasn't the issues with the partners and the council and the regulatory boards and the neighbors, maybe you would have gotten to that point and thought that was a good idea. But it seems like other external affairs were dominating even over the internal phantasm affairs. Real life trumps the natural trumps the supernatural again, I guess, or what we've turned into natural. So bureaucracy defeats the ghosts in terms of I don't know what word I'm trying. Annoyance isn't the right word, but anyway, it'll come to me like in an hour, and I'll kick myself for fumbling and bumbling on here. All right. So, what else do you want to tell us about the haunting experience? Has it changed you at all? I mean, obviously you haven't gone back to the place. I would be dying to know what's going on with the place. And obviously you're like, nah, I'm just washing my hands of that place entirely. But like after this conversation, are you thinking like, I really want to find out what's happened in the last 6 or 7 years in that place? Has this been going on? Was it just me? Were they haunting me, and mostly me, in that place? Because clearly, wherever you are now, you're not being haunted. So, ghosts haunt people, they haunt places. That, or at least that's what we're to be led to believe. But, could there be that confluence of both, where it was you there that they were haunting, or were you just the? And I know you don't know the answer for sure, but were you just the only constant, the only human constant there?
I think you're getting close to the core of it, aren't you? I am tempted to go back and find out what it's all about. I'd have to go for a meal in there and talk to the owner, and they'll be like, "Oh, you're in, are you?" and that kind of thing. And but yeah, no, I'm definitely at some point, whilst I'm still on this sort of plane of existence, going to go and try to discover what happened in there, and if they've had anything at all. And I mean, it's I have sort of, it was all such a crazy year, and I left under such a cloud of that, and it wasn't about that people that I was under a cloud about. It was about the license stuff, because people would say that, oh, we're just a cowboy or something, that sort of thing. And the other investors too, we're all sort of hammered by the system from attempting this kind of project, like a pop-up club project thing, which is not how I envisioned it at all. I envisioned it like a proper arts sort of centre that was going to be there for 5-10 years.
Well, I guess the lesson to the audience is that you need good lawyers more than you need a good exorcism, at least in some cases. So, folks, make sure you consult legal counsel for everything, maybe even a team. It's worth the effort. And then you can always find the seance and the spiritual cleansers at a later date, or find a way to come to an accord with the ghost. Now, you said while you're still on this plane, and I'm sure that was just a coincidence, or a coin of phrase, but I'm not really interested if you were a believer before, because it's none of my business, but and you haven't made it my business. But are you a believer now? And do you think that when you're on another plane of existence, that maybe you'll be able to find these phantasms, these spirits, and go, hey, what was up? What was going on? Do you think that you'll be able to figure out what was going on, or do you think that they'll still have something against you, and you'll have enemies even in the next life?
It's a very good question. And
there's a bunch of them in there, and they're very meta.
Yeah. You can't have that thing where I can't explain what was going on and not have a slightly adjusted experience, because as we both know, and everyone sort of listening to this knows, when you go through something, your entire thoughts about the beliefs you might have had about it before change, and that's not just for supernatural events, which is the only way I can describe this. If I could describe it any other way, I would. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about it as an anecdote, So it's like, we've been changed by it. When it comes to the afterlife, I'm a bit more going to wait and see. As far as I don't think I've done anything bad enough in life to be punished eternally for it. So I just don't do things on I'm too exploratory to be much of a believer in ritual and things like that. So I just like to explore too much to be stuck in a place of belief. But there's so many people, there's so many different beliefs in this world, that my thing about it is so loose as to not be. I'm just an agnostic, basically, and I don't spend much time there. But this experience of mine that we're talking about has given me a different thing to the liminal world. How can it not?
Yeah, no, I would think, and if you're not convinced that it's a ghost, what else could it be? I mean, then we're talking about, the Fae folk, or or gremlins, or aliens, or something interdimensional. Which, by the way, interdimensional might be what a ghost is. I have no idea. I mean, so I would think that it would occupy your thoughts quite a bit. Now, I'm not you, you're not me, and you don't have a show called Garden of Doom, and so obviously, someone doesn't have this show without thinking about these things probably a lot more than a normal person might. I am aware that on the normal scale, I'm closer to abnormal than normal, but I like to think I'm still on the normal scale. But the audience can make its own decision, as can the guests. But I guess I'm not trying to press you, at all, but I imagine that it does make you think about what's next a lot more.
Yeah, in a sense. I don't. The idea that. Are you still there?
Yeah, don't worry. My camera blanked out for a second. We're still here.
Hey, sorry.
It's okay.
I can edit that out.
I saw your face. I don't blame you. It's nothing fantastical. It's nothing. It's actually, I touched a wire, which I do way too much.
Right. So we're being interfered with there. It's like. What was I about to say? I was about to answer your question.
I was asking you if you've had to think about this a whole lot more. I was asking you like all the metaphysical questions of your inner soul, basically.
Yeah. It's. I have absolutely frozen out of what I was thinking due to it. Give me a second to collect it again.
Sure, of course. I apologize. This is entirely my fault. I'm saying that to the audience and to you.
No, it's sort of important as well. It's because it's so. I'm not a strict materialist, so I don't believe that this is all there is. That position of the atheist is too difficult for me, and I don't go from that just the rationalist sort of science position. But the truth is, I also think that the Abrahamic books, all three, are and more, are works of politics as well as God. And I don't believe they're the word of God. So these are old stories that are wonderful and fun and interesting, but actually they're not applicable in many, many ways. So, but we're asked to take things on faith. When you've got an imagination and a desire to explore and to hear other points of view, all 8 billion of them, I don't know how I can stay in a position of faith, because I like to hear and to live and to just treat people as well as possible, which isn't just biblical, but it works for everybody, But
Sure.
It's also helpful to have your guide in the Bible and everything else. I don't deny that. And I come from a cultural Christian family. All country, the world these days is going, what am I, what do I believe in, all the rest of it, because of woke and all the rest of it in Israel. Those stories make you wonder what you are. And I've worked out that I'm a cultural Christian. I don't deny that. I love churches. I love cathedrals. I love Christmas carols. I love many, many of the things about Christianity. I just can't quite go with the concept of hell and some other things around it. So That's my spirituality.
Right. I think that's a really good description, that you're cultural Christian, but spiritual without a defined religion. And I think that a lot of people fit into that. Maybe not Christian, a cultural Jew, a cultural Muslim, a cultural Buddhist, whatever, cultural animist. I don't know. Anyway, start trying to list religions. We'll be here all day. All right. Any last points or anything that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you that you want to impart to a listening audience?
No, it's really interesting to go into that weird year, because I've alluded to the fact that there was a very, very strange time.
Sure.
It wasn't just this. And I would love to kind of come back on your show in the future and talk about the other issues that were going on there, which I'm not able to talk about today, which I'd like. But so they weren't about that place per se. They were just about the system in Britain in general. But it's not a subject for this. But I've talked about everything, and even more than I thought I would. So.
Perfect. Well, you know how to reach me, so when you're ready to talk about that other stuff, and then we'll figure out which show it belongs on, and we'll take care of that. All right. Last silly question. Is there any song that you associate with this story that you would like to be the outro?
Oh, wow. Why didn't I think about that before coming on? What is the Light by the Flaming Lips? I think that would be a...
What is the Light by the Flaming Lips? All right. You got, of course, the last time I made a promise to someone this, for whatever reason, that song on no matter how many different platforms I could find it, my Adobe Audition would not let it transfer. So I actually lied to my last guest, but not for lack of trying. So Jamie Chambers, I'm sorry. But we did find another Linkin Park song, I think. So the Flaming Lips, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of it already.
What is the Light?
What is the Light? I would know it if I saw it, but what is the Light? Flaming Lips. Audience, where can you follow Sean B.W. Parker? Sean?
They go to X platform, to Sean B.W. Parker, EA.
And where can they buy your books if they're interested in buying your art and your books?
Lovely. If they go to Amazon and do a search of Sean B.W. Parker, and Compelling Speech is the last one. Talks about this little stammer that I've got had all my life, but in various cultural, different kinds of ways. Exploratory ways.
Excellent. And while you're enjoying the Flaming Lips, maybe you'll go there and you'll check out his stuff and you'll follow him on X or Twitter. People mock me for calling it X. I don't know why it is called X. No, you don't want to. I don't want to either. And you can follow me on X at Icarus Fell MD, and I wish you would. You can go to the Garden of Doom page on Facebook, and I wish you would. And I'd love for you to give a review and a rating and refer the show to your friends. And while you're thinking about that, you can download Sean's book on Audible. If you get Audible, you get one free book and you get 1 credit a month. No, I'm not sponsored by Audible. I wish I was, because I use it a lot. So folks, Audible, sponsor me. I'm sort of a fan. Anyway, I think that's it. You're going to hopefully enjoy the Flaming Lips next. If not, it's not for lack of trying. Sean, thank you very much for being on the show. Listeners, thank you very much for listening. You will probably get a UFL podcast this week, also strangely on the Garden of Doom feed, which to Sean, that's spring American football, and quite possibly a Garden Views this week also. I'm not sure about that, but thank you all for listening. Thanks to our guest, and you'll hear from us again, if not sooner, next week in the Garden of Doom.